Good afternoon, everyone. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm Councilmember John Quincy as the chair, and we're joined, of course, by Councilmember Johnson, Bender, Council Vice President Glidden, Councilmembers Palmisano, and Yang. And so this is the Ways and Means Committee, and we have a relatively brief agenda for us today, and I'll read through those items. And then immediately following this, we'll be beginning the overview of the budget presentation as well as the capital portion. So we'll be hearing from Ms. Christensen and Mr. Evelyn right after this meeting as we convene that meeting. So let's begin with the Ways and Means Committee agenda, which has, 10 consent items for us and a receive and file. The first three items are from the city attorney's office, and they represent three different settlements. Number 4 is from Finance and Property Services. This is authorizing an amendment to the office lease contract with the Flower Exchange, just removing the city's first right of refusal at the request of the building owner. Information Technology is bringing, that department is bringing forward 3 items. There's a bid for Norstrand Communications for telephone systems, software, and equipment. Risk Master Software Contract Amendment with Computer Science Corporation. And the contract with Norstrand Communications. This is on the help and service desk implementation. The Intergovernment Relations Committee brings forward an item Number 8, this is the Fair Housing Implementation Council Cooperative Funding Agreement for Fair Housing Services. Transportation and Public Works Committee brings forward 2 items. It is the Recycling Fund Policy Agreement with Hennepin County, an amendment, and accepting a low bid with a Viton Company for a bid for stormwater pump station rehabilitation project. Are there any questions or comments on any of those items for committee members? Not seeing any, I'll move the consent agenda. All those in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, and those items carry. The other item of note is the 2015 second quarter financial status report. And that's simply a receive and file, but I wanted to draw members' attention to that report as it's online. And I'm sure you spent your holiday weekend reading through it. So thank you for that. Receive and file, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And that is move forward. So let's see. Do we need any transition time, Ms. Christensen? Do you need a few minutes for that? Okay. So with no further business in front of the Ways and Means Committee, we'll stand adjourned for that meeting, and we'll be opening up the Budget Committee meeting immediately after following. So.
Mike, I got yours loaded on here too.
What's that?
Yours is loaded on my desktop.
Okay, yeah. Well, when you get done, just call mine up then.
Okay.
Very good. Okay. Well, thank you very much for everybody for your patience during the transition and technology. We're now convening the first of 28 budget committees hearings over the next 2 months as we take up the work that was presented on August 12th. Mayor Hodges presented the recommended budget for 2016, and it's the function of the Budget Committee, which is represented by all of the city council members who are on that committee. And so this begins this. We introduced the members of the Ways and Means Committee just prior to this, and since this meeting has been convened, we've been joined by council members Fry, Goodman, and Warsami. Also like to point out, of course, we've been joined by our city coordinator, as well as Patrick Todd, our city assessor, as well as representatives from the mayor's office. And all of this work that's represented in this large budget book was the great work of result of the finance department. So thank you in advance for all of that work. And Ms. Latoni Green down there as the budget director has been doing so much of that. So with that, we'll begin. Ms. Christensen, and you take it from there, and please introduce any other members from your staff that is here.
Thank you, Chair Quincy and members of the Budget Committee. Thank you for giving me time today to present to you an overview of Mayor Hodges' 2016 budget recommendation. It's been a while since we've had an opportunity to look at it since her recommendation earlier in August. So hopefully I can add some clarity and enlighten you on a few things that were incorporated that may not have been mentioned in her speech. Before we get started with the presentation, I want to be sure that everyone has received a copy of the 2016 recommended budget book. It's available online, and we did provide paper copies for all ward offices. And within that budget book, you should be able to find all the pertinent information, much more detail than I'm able to present to you today. And I will refer to various sections in the budget book as I go through the presentation, so you may want to note which section you can gather more information on that particular line item. And you're getting copies of the presentation right now. And feel free as we move along, if there are any questions at that particular time, to stop me so I can address them when it's pertinent.
And before you begin, Ms. Christensen, I wanted to point out to my colleagues, we are using speaker management, if that's convenient for you, or if you can get our attention should you have any questions with the red tags, and we'll be able to get to those questions.
As we look at the mayor's 2016 recommended budget, I'd like to start off with some of the major highlights before I delve into more of the details. Never mind the man behind the curtain here,
Yes,
it's just the
spaghetti's
Wizard of Oz, it's fine. So the mayor's 2016 recommendation, as you know, includes a 3.4% increase in the city's property tax levy. Remember, that's only for the city portion of a particular property's overall tax. And we will get into that in more detail in a later section relating to how property taxes are calculated and distributed for the average property owner in the city. The mayor's recommended budget is $1.2 billion. It's a 2.7% or a $31.8 million increase from the 2015 adopted budget, which was also $1.2 billion, but it was rounded down. The mayor's recommended budget maintains the city's current service levels, including inflation, as well as mandated cost increases of approximately $17.5 million. And what that means is that we are able to perform the same level of services that we budgeted for in 2015, no changes in service levels, and also accommodating contractual obligations associated with various agreements, including labor agreements, at a cost of $17.5 million. And with a budget of $1.2 billion, and much of that budget is included with contractual services to outside vendors as well as with staff, there is typically a fairly sizable current service level increase on an annual basis. So the mayor's base budget does accommodate funding for the city's current service level. The mayor's recommendation also includes ongoing funding for program enhancements of approximately $6.3 million. There were a total of $15.8 million of budget requests that came forward from the departments for the 2016 budget for ongoing operations. The mayor's budget also provides for $24.1 million in one-time funding, compared to asks of approximately $38.9 million. The mayor's budget recommendation also lays the groundwork for the future. It provides enhanced funding in the public safety area with funding for 2 additional police officers, as well as additional civilian staff in the police department, largely to assist in the implementation of the body camera program. The mayor's budget also includes an exercise we like to call right sizing, in which we scrutinize the individual departments in terms of budget utilization over time and monitor where the money has been spent and where it may not have been spent. In those cases where there have been long-term surpluses in individual departments, we worked with the departments as well as with the mayor's office to identify areas in which sustained funding wasn't necessary. If they had continued budget surpluses, there were adjustments made in their base budget to reduce their current service level to reflect what it actually did cost to provide that level of services. The mayor's budget also provides resources for programs in support of racial diversity and youth programs to support the youth in our community and those who need additional assistance. We're also including additional resources for the city's clean energy initiatives. And part of the mayor's budget includes managing the levels of fund balance across the city and also being aware of impacts of current decisions on out-year needs and responses. So from a high-level overview, we'll move into a financial overview of the mayor's budget recommendation. Again, the mayor's budget recommendation is $1.2 billion. This is $31.8 million over the 2015 level, or 2.7% overall increase. The mayor's recommendation includes 35.25 additional FTEs above that incorporated into the 2015 budget. You'll see that the 2016 budget includes nearly 4,000 employees, 3,960, and somebody who must work 3 days a week. The overall budget for 2016 by expenditure type is reflected in the chart in front of you. You'll see that in large part, the city's salaries and wages, as well as the fringe benefits, incorporate approximately 1/3 of the city's overall budget. So earlier I mentioned when there are contractual obligations to provide for union contracts or negotiated contracts, that is one of the first items that get funded in the annual budget. Additionally,
I'm sorry, this might be a pause. I know we had a couple of questions. I know Councilmember Glidden, I think you're first.
Yeah, just super fast, since you have this slide that shows there's an increase of 35.25 positions from 2015, and your previous slide, 2 slides previous, says that you're eliminating redundant unfilled positions, that you're eliminating some unfilled positions. So is the 35.25 kind of a net increase, or
Yes.
Is that, okay.
And there were very few actual positions eliminated. In large part, it was more of a regular operating budget.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
In looking further at the slide in front of you, as I also mentioned, contractual obligations associated with the city's partners, including the Met Council for sewer and wastewater processing, we do have obligations to maintain those level of services under the current agreements. So with an additional 25% approximately of the city's budget, it does become impacted by inflationary increases as well as impositions sometimes outside of the city's control. When we look at the city's overall budget by its major function, it's really a pretty busy chart. You'll see that in the lower left-hand corner, there are a number of functions that are typically considered to be public works functions. We have consolidated a number of areas within public works for the purpose of this presentation, including administration, parking services, planning, and engineering. But for your information and portrayed on this slide is the individual utility operations within the city. You'll see that if we lumped together, so to speak, the sanitary sewer, stormwater, water distribution, and solid waste, and the public works operations, that it would become a rather sizable piece of the city's overall operations, probably close to 20 to 25% of the city's overall operating budget. The other large portion of the city's annual budget is in the public safety area. You'll see that the police department incorporates approximately 15% of the overall budget, and then fire is an additional 6%. Within some of the other areas, you'll see that debt service and total capital improvement, while they do fund a number of activities, one can generally presume that the costs associated in the debt service and the capital improvement are largely related to infrastructure projects in the roads, public works type related activities. So if you're looking at what base services are provided by the city, add together the public works and a significant piece of both debt service and capital improvements, and you'll get a good idea of what goes into the city's infrastructure. How do we pay for the city's $1.2 billion budget? The slide in front of you shows the city's major revenue sources by the origin of those funds. You'll see that the city's charges for sales and services in the upper right-hand corner is approximately 40%. And you may wonder what exactly are those charges for services for? Are we providing individual services for residents? That is largely associated with the fees that we charge for the city's enterprise funds. The city's enterprise funds are largely self-supporting. They charge fees that are able to maintain the ongoing cost and operation of that function. So again, we have the sanitary sewer system, the storm sewer, the waterworks, as well as the solid waste. So each of those functions charges an appropriate fee to maintain their level of service. The other area of funding within the mayor's 2016 recommended budget is property taxes, funding just less than 25% of the overall budget. And then we also have seen growth in the city's licenses and permits and have made significant adjustments in the budget for 2016 to recognize current and recent successes in garnering that revenue. Local sales taxes are also incorporated into the overall funding structure of the city. And not to,
Ms. Christensen,
please.
before we go on, the revenues, are these forecasted obviously for 2016?
Yes.
And I'm looking at like franchise fees, for example. Is that up or down from what we've experienced in 15?
Chair Quincy and members of the committee, we've made a significant adjustment in the franchise fees because of the new franchise agreements that were completed earlier, I think it was late last year, early this year, and we have seen a growth in the franchise fees and have accommodated that growth in the 2016 budget.
Okay. Are there any other significant changes in our revenue distribution or projection?
I think with the adjustment that was made in the licenses and permits is substantial and goes a long way towards capturing recent growth. And if you recall, the end of 2014, we did see that there was a significant surplus in licenses and permit fees, and we have made that adjustment for 16. So we don't believe that we'll continue to see that type of a surplus. We believe we've captured the ongoing activity level.
Councilmember Yang? Oh, I'm sorry. Down at this end, I apologize. Thank you. Let's go with Council President Johnson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Christensen, what is state non-LGA at 77.8 million?
Chair Quincy, Council President Johnson, that would typically be reflective of funding such as MSA, the municipal state aid that we receive for both the operations and the construction on the city's joint roadways with the state of Minnesota.
Okay. And the LGA number, 27.7 million. Yeah. Is that correct?
No, that's
No,
not correct.
That's not right, is it? It's like
No.
60, isn't it?
Let's see.
It's closer to 70.
Yeah,
It's 68.4.
68.4.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
LG.
Yeah.
This chart is not good then.
Actually, Chair Quincy and members of the committee, I switched the labels on the state non-LGA and the LGA piece. So the 77.8 is reflective of the overall allocation from the state, and the other is the MSA and other state grants. I apologize
So
for that.
The total is correct, it's just the
The
label
total is
what you're saying?
correct. I labeled it wrong.
Okay, when you obviously modify that, and that would be helpful.
Right.
Great,
And we'll correct that before the presentation is put on the website.
thank you. Do you have other comments, Council President? Or you finished? Did I miss another tag down at that end? I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, I had the same question, which has been answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Gordon, you're good?
Yeah, I had that question too, but now I'm also curious about the franchise fee. What does that include? Our cable franchise as well as our gas and electric utility companies?
Chair Quincy, Councilmember Gordon, the franchise fees reflected in this chart are all of the city's franchise fees. So it would be cable, gas, electric, and I think we're done with the buses. So
And there's 2 cable franchise now, is that right?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So coincidentally, I was going to speak more about LGA, so I appreciate the opportunity to have that topic brought forward. As we can see in the chart before us, the city is able to reduce its reliance on external resources, particularly from the state of Minnesota in the form of local government aid. Now, this chart only reflects the city's general fund because we only use LGA in the general fund, but you'll see from 2002 through the mayor's proposal in 2016 that LGA has been reduced from 41% of the city's general fund to 14%. And that is due in large part to several factors, one being the shift of local sales taxes from the convention center into the general fund, as well as significant growth in some of the other non-tax revenues, particularly those that we've mentioned in terms of licenses and fees. So the growth in the local economy that we believe is captured in the licenses and permits, as well as the local sales taxes, is a huge factor in what allows us to reduce our reliance on LGA on an ongoing basis. That doesn't mean that we don't need it. It just means that we're able to withstand some of the volatility that may come over time in the funding that we do receive in the form of LGA. And finally, I would like to give you just an overview of the staffing levels within the city over the time from 2004 through the mayor's recommendation in 2016. You'll see that the low was in 2012 when we were facing extremely difficult times within the city, and we've been able to recoup some of those positions, but we're still largely below the high levels of staffing that we saw in the mid-2000s. And for a summary of the positions that were added in the 2016 budget recommendation, they're described in text in the budget, in the financial overview section. There's also a schedule in the back of your book, which is Schedule 5 provides a summary of the FTE counts by department over time. And with that, I'd like to move into some of the major considerations that were contemplated when the budget was being crafted. Again, these are also incorporated in the financial overview section of your budget book. Many items needed to be taken into consideration when the budget was being created for 2016. Part of the budget we have as an ongoing obligation is related to the city's closed pension funds. We have an obligation when we merged in several of our pension funds to provide a certain level of funding to ensure that the long-term stability of those pensioners was guaranteed. In 2015, the MRF closed pension fund reached 80% funding, which was the trigger for it to be fully merged into the state program. This will, at some point in the future, provide some opportunities to relook at the funding mechanism and the agreement with the state. We don't have information on that at this time. And in the near term, we are levying the same amount as we have in the past several years in order to ensure that we have the proper level of resources before we receive that new information. We also have ongoing liabilities for pensions relating to current employees, and we handle that through the ongoing contributions for PERA, the Public Employee Retirement Association. We are mandated by state law to provide a certain percentage of employee wage match as an employer. For the police and fire, the city is required to match 16.2% of the wages for those staff. And for the coordinated plan, which is essentially everybody else, 7.5%. And again, we are legislatively obligated to pay that. The individual bargaining units cannot bargain that as a change in their benefit. It's entirely mandated upon us.
Thank you, Ms. Christensen. Councilmember Goodman, did you have your tag up? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm sorry. It's moving very fast, and I'm trying to comprehend
Okay.
previous slides. So I'm just looking at the first mayor's budget. I'm looking at page 11. The first budget of this new council, or the first Hodges budget. One of the reasons we were able to keep taxes down because our staffing level was down, and now it looks like we're on a historical hiring spree. And I'm interested in the breakdown of the number of people hired and what departments they were hired in. How many police were hired, for example, from in the 14, 15, and now 16 budget? And how many firefighters have been hired within that period? And then where are all of these other positions? Because, I mean, anyone looking at this would think that we were trying to hold the line on taxes and we were reducing the number of staff. And I think it was probably a little bit on the low side myself, but this looks like a fairly significant increase in this mayor and council's proposed and adopted budgets. And that is a big source of money. Out of 20-something% in the previous employment benefits is 30-some-5% of the city's budget. Are we just creating new positions to do new things left and right? I mean, we're spending $36 million more. So I'm interested in where these positions are coming from and how and the public understanding that. How many are police and fire, and where are all these other positions?
Chair Quincy, Councilmember Gordon, page I-8 in your budget book reflects a schedule showing staffing levels by individual department from 2003 through the recommendation. Now, that doesn't specifically describe which positions they are, if it's an admin person versus a firefighter. Largely, changes in staffing in those departments have been limited to line staff. Additionally, the 35.25 new positions also reflects positions that are funded by external revenues or non-property tax resources. So in the event of having gotten a Bloomberg grant, for example, you would see a change in staffing that doesn't necessarily have an impact on property taxes.
Okay, so what you heard us talking about was that those of us that are not super technology savvy do not have the budget up on our computer to be able to get to page I-8. So that's beyond my technology level. I have a hard copy in my office. I'm wondering if someone in Human Resources can outline for me from the 14 budget on, where are these positions located? And then it'll answer my question about police and fire. I'm just looking enterprise-wide. So it's okay if it's funded through a different source, because the public is not paying attention to, well, that's Bloomberg. It was funded by Bloomberg, so that's 6 more people. They're looking at what the property tax increase is and more positions that we're funding. And I just want to see what that is, because it's a pretty, when you look at the graph, it stands out. So, and eventually I'll be able to find page I-8. It just won't be here in the middle of your presentation.
I think that's absolutely, and I think we'll be able to do more in-depth detail and summary. Council Vice President Glidden.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad you brought up these questions. I think once we maybe get a report that, and I think that would be helpful to kind of look at it, it'd be good to also kind of chunk out some of these things that are major initiatives that went through a long council process. Like one of the big hiring chunks, of course, is our decisions around information technology and bringing some of that staff back in-house. So once you take out some of those chunks or grant funded positions, then what does that picture really look like? And so I'm glad this has been brought up, and it'll be interesting to see what that picture really looks like.
Yeah, the technology, I hadn't thought about that, but we've basically created an in-house department and body counts, right? Councilmember Goodman, I didn't mean to cut you off if you still had a question. Okay, good. Some of us will go old school with the book. Councilmember Bender.
Mr. Chair, I actually wondered, is there a way that we could easily have the link emailed to the council members here?
I'm sorry?
I think we did receive an electronic
Latonia will send it
link,
out right
but
now.
could you just resend it to us
Yeah,
now?
we'll
so
do
those
that.
of us-
This might be a good opportunity as well, Ms. Christensen. You can describe how we're helping the public as well as council members navigate the new finance page on the website.
Chair Quincy, with the assistance of your office and in cooperation with the clerk's office, we've been working to streamline and make the landing page for the city's financial information a lot more streamlined and intuitive. So when you go to that page, there's a matrix that has some very delightful depictions of information that the user might be looking for that you can click into that will take you immediately into that subject matter. So we believe that should help folks navigate a little better, as well as providing an overall look at what the budget process is coming up. So as we go through the various presentations by departments, they will be incorporated into that budget page. So the residents, if they're not able to watch today, can access the presentations at a later point in time.
Right. And I think as we do our department hearings, we'll be able to go in depth, at how each department is affected in terms of staffing, but we'll be providing some sort of summary information for that. I think we can continue.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Quincy. So moving on from the pension liabilities, as we just discussed, the Mayor's 2016 recommended budget does include significant funding for the city's staff, as well as benefits associated with retaining those staff. You'll see a budget of $292 million for salaries and wages, with an additional $64 million associated with benefits. The mayor's budget also includes funding for capital equipment. As for those who have been here several years, you'll recall that we implemented the capital asset request system, or the CARS system, for the 2014 budget process. It was an initiative to allow us to begin 5-year ongoing planning for operational equipment within the departments. And for the 5-year planning cycle from 2016 through 19, we see that the city received requests from the departments totaling almost $115 million. And these are for items that don't rise to the level necessarily of bonding, usually things that are $1 million or less, something more than $5,000 that's expected to last more than 1 year. And in the past, often departments were able only to obtain these bits of equipment if they had ill-gotten gain, so to speak, or unspent budget in other areas. And as part of that right-sizing activity that I mentioned earlier, no longer are departments maintaining unspent dollars to do fun things. They're being turned back into the overall city budget for redistribution as part of the budget process. So it's very first steps this year in looking at doing that, but we believe that the CARS process really allows for more equality amongst the departments in terms of meeting their operating needs. For 2016, the request for CARS totaled $30 million, and the budget recommends 23.4. Now, again, not all of that is within the city's general fund. $6.97 million of the $23 million is anticipated to be funded through the city's general fund balance as a one-time expense. Other budget considerations, as always, we need to take care of our outstanding bond obligations, meaning we've taken out a loan for any number of purposes, and our first obligation is to the bondholders and to repay our debts. Debt service incorporates about 10% of the city's total budget. We also have to factor in funding for the city's infrastructure. The city has the CLIck program that will be presented to you by Mr. Ablin later on, but within that program, there was $124 million recommended for 2016 and $661 million over 5 years. If within the 2016 budget recommendation, there is also funding recommended for a number of technology needs. We are in the process of over time transitioning funding for a number of the technology needs from the capital bonding program to the more appropriate ongoing operating capital within the CARS program. We also have an ongoing obligation to Hennepin County for the transition of the library a number of years ago. There is a bond referendum that we are still on the hook, so to speak, to provide funding for. That's through 2030. We also had promised a declining amount over time to assist with their operations, and that will be phased out in 2017. As we look to the future, and I mentioned earlier that the mayor's recommendation does take into consideration future impacts on the community, the mayor and staff took into consideration the city's diverse community and the regulatory complexity and unfunded mandates that we experience. The previously shrinking workforce with increased demands, and with the recent economics and the ability of the city to garner additional non-tax resources, we have been able to meet some inroads into providing resources to bring on new staff to respond to some of these increasing demands, particularly as it relates to inspecting properties and so on. We do continue being concerned about workforce turnover. As the economy improves, more folks are finding that their retirement plans are in a better state and are more willing to free up their futures, which leaves a hole sometimes in the department's operations. So that continues to be a challenge. We have technology needs that are ever evolving. We also have emergency and security management needs. That's an ongoing issue. We have aging office facilities, and our workforce is spread out over a rather wide area, and that continues to provide challenges. And again, because the economy is moving forward and there's a construction boom, staff are feeling feeling pressure to meet the needs of the customers. Moving on to a discussion regarding property taxes recommended within the 2016 budget. For the sake of folks who may watch this presentation later on, I'd like to do just a quick overview and refresher on how the property tax system works, just so we kind of all get grounded in the impacts of this decision. So who levies property taxes? Many political subdivisions in the state of Minnesota levy property taxes. Cities such as Minneapolis, various townships, counties, schools, and other special districts, including water management organizations, the Met Council, the regional rail, and housing and redevelopment authorities. The city's overall levy of approximately $297 million is spread out for a number of purposes within the city. You'll see that the city is the responsible authority to certify and process the levy for a number of other activities, including the Parks Board, the Teachers Retirement Association, and the Municipal Building Commission. So when we talk about the city levy, it's not always strictly related to operations that are controlled by you folks. Some of it is reflective of activities that are happening outside of your purview. So who pays for property taxes? All property owners, generally all property owners, are responsible for paying property taxes. Various properties are classified according to their use. So there's commercial, industrial, residential, apartments, and then recreational and cabin. I think there's one agricultural parcel in the city of Minneapolis. It shows up as less than 0.0001, so I don't usually show it. The property owners who are excluded from paying property taxes include other governments, nonprofits, and many of those organizations enter into an agreement with the city whereby they will pay some portion to the city in lieu of property taxes as a support mechanism for the services that that particular property receives, such as snow plowing. We don't, when there's a call to 911, the dispatcher doesn't ask whether or not you pay property taxes. They send somebody. So all properties receive services in the city, whether they pay taxes or not. There has been a shift in who's actually paying the property taxes in the city of Minneapolis as well as throughout the state. There's been changes in the tax code that have made some properties valued more highly than others in terms of how the property taxes are applied to them. In the chart before you, you'll see that back in 1996, commercial and industrial property was over 50% of the tax capacity within the city of Minneapolis. And with changes in the tax structure and reducing the rate at which taxes are applied to commercial and industrial, you'll see that in 2014 and 15, that has been reduced to just over a third, and that residential properties over time have picked up a higher portion of the overall tax burden. In the parentheses, I just wanted you to be aware of where these numbers were for pay 2015. And I think it's interesting to note the shift away from residential to apartment. And I think we may see that a little bit longer as we continue to see the apartment buildings rise and potentially more folks moving into those. So proportionally, more of the city's value will be in apartments than in residential areas.
Before you leave the slide, Ms. Christensen, I think Councilmember Palmisano had a quick question.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'm curious, Ms. Christensen, how are condos, is that considered residential or apartment? And then is part of this increase in apartments due to the increase in number of new apartment buildings in the Twin Cities? So kind of a two-part.
I may need to rely on Mr. Todd for the condos. I believe if the condos are homesteaded, they're considered residents. And then as far as the second question, I think it's a combination of both the number and the timing of the apartment buildings, because there's a year lag in the valuation of the property being considered as taxable. So in the first year when it's just the property, it's not worth a heck of a lot. But once it's fully built out, then the valuation increases. And I think we're seeing some of that.
Through the chair, Councilmember Palmisano, Patrick Todd, the Minneapolis Assessor's Office. Your question regarding do we tax condominiums at the residential rate? That is correct. So that number that Ms. Christensen is showing is all residential. It would be considered anything less than 4 units is classified as residential. So it'd be condos and co-ops and duplex, triplex, things like that. As far as the apartments go, that is both actually, because the rents are going up. That moves all buildings up. So a fourplex, duplex, triplex, and the major buildings downtown, those are all appreciating in values because the owners are gaining, the rents are going up, and they're finding that they're a really popular investment for investors at this point in time. So the second question, it's both.
Thank you.
Now, narrowing the scope of our discussion to the residents of the city of Minneapolis, the chart before you reflects the transition in the median residential home value over time. And I don't think anyone's terribly surprised to see the high point in approximately 2006 with a low point falling in 2012. Many people saw dramatic decreases in their estimated market value. At the same time, we're seeing now and back in 2015 that we're continuing to see growth in the median residential value. And coincidentally, but not necessarily related, the city's overall property tax, reflected in the chart before you, shows that the city's property tax levy has stabilized in the last several years. And again, going back to my previous comment about the overall property tax levy is actually used for a number of different activities within the city. So this chart is a little more detailed, a little bit busy, but it shows you who we are certifying levying on behalf of when we are sending our certified levy to the county and when the property tax statement comes out and reflects the city line. The city line includes a lot of things, including funding for the city's general fund, the park board, including their tree levy, our bond redemption fund, which is what we use to pay for the program that was put into place a number of years ago in which we accelerated our infrastructure replacement. The pension levies are reflected as well as the Board of Estimate and Taxation. The others that we typically need to certify are for the MBC, teachers' retirement, and that library debt that I mentioned earlier. So given that we've seen increases in and shifts in the distribution of the city's tax capacity, what would a property tax increase of about 3.4% feel like to a taxpayer? There's a lot of factors that play into that. In large part, market value. We've seen that the estimated market values from Hay 15 to 16 are currently looking at about a 9% overall increase. There's the market value exclusion program, which is, it sounds simple, but it's a relatively odd calculation whereby if your house is valued at less than $413,000, some portion of your home's value is not considered taxable. The citywide tax base, the tax capacity is actually up 12%, 11.7, I believe is the actual number. The impact of retiring tax increment districts also impacts what an individual taxpayer will pay. And then, of course, the levy amount that is adopted by the city council. Remember, we don't adopt a rate, we adopt an amount, which is then applied across all property valuation, tax capacity within the city of Minneapolis. So the mayor's proposal includes a 3.4% levy increase. The tax rate is projected to decrease. The tax rate is merely the calculation of the levy and the tax capacity. And overall residential property market values increased 7%. Generally speaking, homestead residential properties with market value increases of less than 5% are likely to see a decrease in their property taxes. If more than that, there may be a slight increase. And of course, as we know, no single property is reflected in the median, nor is it reflected in the average. Property is seeing 17 and 18% valuation increases will see increases in their taxes. Properties who have no change in their valuation likely will not. And quickly, I'd like to do a quick overview of the city's general fund. As you know, the city's general fund is the area within the budget that incorporates the basic services that the city provides, including police and fire, street maintenance, as well as elections and the other administrative functions of the city, including the city attorney's office. So the general fund encompasses about 36% of the total budgets. It's $488 million. It includes departmental spending of $416 million, which is a 4% increase from 2015. The levy increase in the general fund is 3.55%. It was actually a reduction in 2015 because of a need to shift levy resources to the city's bond redemption levy. So it's a little bit of a catch-up this year. Revenues in the general fund are many of the same that we saw in funding for the overall budget. You'll see that property taxes in the general fund is approximately 1/3. It was 25% of the city's overall budget. The local sales taxes are at 16%. And we see that LGA, or local government aid, where I do have it reflected correctly, is at 14% or $68 million. And to get a feel for the change in the various sources from year to year, You'll see this table reflects the increase in property taxes within the city's general fund, the sales taxes, and then I'd like to draw your attention to the 11% increase that's been incorporated for the city's license and permit fees. We believe that does get us more on a closer track to what's actually going on. The revenue drivers when we're looking at crafting the budget include the availability of fund balance for short-time or one-time activities. What we're getting from the state in terms of LGA also impacts our decisions. We look at the levels of licensing and permitting to ensure that we're capturing an appropriate amount so that we rely on non-tax revenues to the extent possible. The franchise agreements, the new franchise agreements allows for us to adjust the budget by about 8.5% in that particular area. And we're also responsible for taking care of growth in the local taxes. At the same time, we need to consider the expenditures. Those are the costs associated with salaries and benefits that we discussed, inflation, contractual obligations, the operating capital and their associated costs, as well as program enhancements. And again, the financial overview section of the mayor's recommended budget book lays out all of the recommendations by line item detail as to what they are and what they're for. The city also has a number of functions that are funded through its special revenues. Special revenues are typically those revenues that we are only able to use for specific purposes. And if we are not using it for that specific purpose, we don't get the revenue. So they have a very linked one-to-one relationship. One example of that is the city's CDBG or its HUD allocation. For 2016, we've estimated a 15% reduction in the allocation from the final amount that we received in 2015. We've also been informed that that's likely to happen. So rather than providing for a budget that relies on funding that is not likely to occur, we've estimated the reduction and incorporated it into the budget. And that has also been applied to the other HUD funding sources, including home, ESG, and HOPWA.
So this is, again, anticipating. When would be the timing of when we'd actually know what those HUD
I think we usually get final information in March or April, and at that time, we typically will come back with any adjustments to the consolidated plan that may be necessary. Okay. The city's convention center is also a special revenue fund. The convention center has a revenue expectation of about $17 million and operating expenses of 26. A portion of the convention center's ongoing operations as well as its capital program are funded from its capital and its debt are funded from a transfer from the general fund comprised of resources associated with the local taxes.
Councilmember Goodman had a question.
Thank you, Ms. Christensen. I'm wondering, it just kind of came to mind when you brought this up. What happens when conventions come to the convention center and then they don't pay? Meaning they're supposed to pay, they sign a contract to pay, and then they don't. Is that considered like a loss and it's projected somewhere within the convention center's funds?
Chair Quincy, Councilmember Goodman, I don't have a real good answer for that. My assumption is that we don't typically budget for write-offs in the convention center due to what I would call no-shows. My sense is if they've signed a contract, we would work with our friendly city attorney and see what we can garner to the extent that the contract was broken.
Okay, so we should talk about the latest issue with a convention. Yep. It didn't cancel, it came, we covered it, they didn't pay. Yep. They're not going to pay. I don't think the convention center should have to eat the cost of that.
Right.
So you're aware of the situation I'm talking about.
Chair Quincy and Councilmember Goodman, I'll also ask Mr. Johnson to have ready any information on that particular topic when his turn comes to present. Yeah. There are also a number of other special revenue funds in the city that provide funding for many of the activities. We don't spend a lot of time getting into detail because, as I mentioned earlier, they're typically a one-to-one relationship between the money coming in and being used for the purpose that it came, that generated the revenue. So just very quickly, there are a number of special revenues associated with the city's development activities, including TIF. Regulatory Services continues to maintain a small special revenue fund. The police department does as well, and Neighborhood and Community Relations does have its own funding source that is used to maintain funding for the neighborhoods. And jumping into the city's enterprise fund, I mentioned earlier that the city's enterprise funds are essentially quasi business type activities. They're expected to be self-supporting. And that's the sanitary sewer, storm sewer, water, and solid waste. The following slide shows an overview of the change in the budget. You'll see that there's about a 3.4% change in the overall budgets for all of these functions, largely reflecting inflation and other contractual costs. And the subsequent slides show out-year projections for the next 5 years as to where the various utility funds are estimating their rates will go. I'll leave you to review that at your leisure, and when the Public Works Department is here for their presentation, Mr. Kotke and his team will be able to give you more detail. Stormwater staying flat. Approximate 2% increases for water, and a combined bill. We're trying to generally maintain 5% or less annual cost increase. You'll see that the sanitary sewer jump in 2016 is largely related to a change in the allocation methodology from the Met Council relating to the environmental services. Those are pass-through funds. And the city's intergovernmental or the internal service funds, again, I think the big story here is that we're continuing to scrutinize what's currently going on in any of those individual funds and adjusting the budget to be more reflective of what's actually going on rather than using static assumptions in terms of growth. So we've adjusted all of those budgets lower than the 2015 level based upon what we're projecting in 15. And we always like to toot our horn a little bit and keep pointing out that all of the internal service funds are stabilized ahead of time in terms of their workout plan. So we're really hopeful that now with this new stability within the internal service funds, that will allow more flexibility in other areas of the city's budget because we don't have that variability. The budget includes funding for capital. Mr. Aben will be up shortly to give you an overview of the funding in the city's CLIC process. Before you have incorporated just the 2016 recommendation by the mayor at $124 million. The CARS process is also incorporated into the overall capital number. I did go through this at length earlier. If you have questions, I'm more than happy to go back to that. We had requests of $115 million and $30 million for 16. We're funding 23.4 with the general fund kicking in just under $7 million. And
Can you
with
go back
that,
to that
yeah.
one slide? What do you mean the general fund's kicking in 7? Oh, out of
For
the
the
general
CARS
fund that's
program,
there?
correct.
It's using available resources instead
Right.
of going into debt
Correct.
additionally.
Yep.
Thank you.
And we do find that this mechanism is handy also in terms of monitoring the city's cash flow. So we know in advance when we're going to be buying a $1 million fire truck, and we make sure that we're ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, next steps in the 2016 budget process, we'll be back here. Well, I'll be back here again tomorrow, and Councilmember Quincy will also be back here tomorrow for a meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation to consider the proposed property tax levy for 2016 of the 3.4% increase, $297 million. The department presentations to the Budget Committee will begin on Friday, September 18th at 9:30 in this room. By September 30th, we are required by state law to certify the maximum levy, the proposed levy is determined and adopted by the Board of Estimate and Taxation, and we will subsequently certify that to Hennepin County. The truth in taxation notices are sent out the second week in November. That is the opportunity for residents and other property owners to get a feel for what they may be paying in 2016 for their property taxes based upon their current values and the proposed levy. We have a public hearing on November 18th to receive public comments. Your opportunity for budget markup is on December 4th and 7th. I believe both of those sessions are at 1 in the afternoon. And on December 9th at 6:05, the Board of Estimate and Taxation meets, as well as the City Council for the city's budget adoption for 2016. And all of these dates are available on that budget website. With no further ado, I'd like to introduce the debt guy, Mike Ablin, who's our Director of Capital and Debt.
As we're making that transition, if there's an opportunity or any additional questions from Ms. Christensen? Not seeing any?
Okay, you got it all under control.
Thank you.
Howard, you want me to click or anything?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. As Sandy said, I'm Michael Ablin, the Director of Capital and Debt for the city. And I get the honor of doing the fund presentation because capital is exciting and has a lot of benefits for our residents. So today I'm going to go through the what's in the capital budget as well as the debt service budget. And I'm going to start with just some recent pictures of improvements that have been completed in the capital program. That's kind of the fun part of the presentation. Then I'm going to talk about a few key terms about the capital and debt as I lead into what's in the 5-year capital program. And then finally, what's in the debt service budget, some statistics about the city's debt, and then conclusions. So before I get going on pictures, I just want to do a shout out to some colleagues in the Public Works Department, the Building Commission, and the Minneapolis Park Board that provided me a lot of pictures. So we have Jeff Handelin, Chris Trembeth, Larry Matsumoto, Tracy Lindgren, Jenny Hager, Simon Blensky from Public Works, Teresa Baker from MBC, and also Adam Arvinson from the Park Board. So without their pictures, my presentation wouldn't be quite as fun. And also I want to thank Jeff Metzen on my staff who helps put together a lot of the information for this presentation. So these pictures are in your handout too in color, so you can see those. So here we have Hennepin Avenue before. Some improvements were made. And then here's a picture of, oops, I went too far. I don't know why that's not working. Sandy, is there a way to manually operate this? Yeah, but it's jumping for some reason on that. Yeah, but it's jumping. I don't know why it's jumping past some of the slides. There's, yeah.
Technical difficulties.
Let's try that. Okay, that works. Okay, so here's a picture afterwards on Hennepin Avenue, so you can see the striping, improvements in the safety of basically traffic movement. We have the color representing the bike path where they're supposed to go. So here's a picture of Oak Street before. A lot of the things I'm going to show you today are bike protection related, paving related, and then some of our major reconstruction activities. So here's Oak Street before, and Oak Street after some bike protection has been installed. And here's another picture of Oak Street from a different view. So we're doing a lot in the city to help improve safety for our bike riders. Here's West 36th Street before we put in some bike protection. And then here's a picture of it afterwards. So you can see a lot of safety items are being added. This thing is jumping. Not sure why this is doing this.
It's because you have this slide. See the little line through 15?
All right, here's 11th Avenue South beforehand.
Yeah, he's good.
Sorry about that. This picture is kind of interesting because you can see where we've used asphalt to improve potholes on a concrete bridge. It's actually kind of a artistic sort of view of it. And then here's a picture of the guys working on the bridge, taking out rotten concrete, basically. And here's a picture where they had to take out all the concrete in a certain area to fix it. And a picture of the finished product. So a really nice improvement to a bridge. This is the bridge repair and rehab program. This is one of the highest rated projects from CLIC. It's obviously a big safety factor for the city, and it's very important. Here's a picture of 15th Avenue and 4th Street. Unfortunately, what we don't see in this picture, if you look right in here, is this was from 2013, and you can see the outline of the Metrodome there. And afterwards, the roadway is done, and it's now 2015, and we're seeing the U.S. Bank Stadium rise from the rubble. So kind of an interesting view. The next pictures are a series of our favorite improvements, I think, around here lately, our paving improvements. So here's 2nd Street North resurfacing, 9th Street South resurfacing project, again, some bike safety included. 26th Street East resurfacing. These are all 2014 and 15 projects I'm showing you. 34th Avenue South. Nice smooth surfaces. 42nd Avenue South. McKinley Street Northeast. And here's a picture of West River Parkway after it's been resurfaced. So a lot of really nice paving projects that have been completed. The last series of pictures are related to Martin Luther King Park. So we have the old version of the park. You can see kind of some rust on some of these poles, not a lot of color, kind of utilitarian type things from years ago. We got the stainless steel slide here tube. And then here's what it looks like today. So very vibrant colors, a lot more interesting things for the kids to play on. You can see a bunch of people enjoying the new park, which is good. Here's a picture of some of the kids enjoying the new things to climb on. And finally, my most important picture, and that is our future. And that's our kids having fun, enjoying infrastructure. A lot of this was about safety for our future. So I think that was a very successful improvement. All right, now I'm going to talk about a few terms that are involved in the next part of my presentation. So we have net debt bonds, which you've heard the term before. This is the type of debt that the CLIC members are most impactful on their decision making. This is the kind of money that helps to leverage state and federal funds, county funds, municipal state aid. We use it to augment what we can accomplish with special assessments. So it's a very important funding source for the capital program. And it's paid for, these bonds are paid for with the bond redemption levy. I'm going to spend a little time talking about that and where it's been and where it's going and how that will help us do capital in the future. And then finally, debt service. I'm going to talk about payment of principal and interest on bonds and some statistics about debt. So this is the 5-year program for capital. As Sandy had mentioned, we have about $661 million of items in the 5-year plan. You can see the percentages there. Obviously, the biggest piece is Public Works because they have the utilities, the sewer and water fund, and as well as the streets, roads, bridges, etc. Technology we talked about a little bit in the previous presentation. This is one that we're hoping to eventually move to the operating side of the budget process, so that will likely be reduced in the future. Public grounds and facilities, this is the category for fire stations and police stations and public works facilities and major building improvements. And then this is the funding sources for the 5-year capital program. So you can see, again, the net debt bonds is close to a quarter of the funding for the program. Some of the other big pieces, of course, are sewer and water funds that are generated by utility fees. These enterprises have obviously big plants like the couple water plants and all the pipe network for sanitary sewers and storm sewers and tunnels, and so they're expensive infrastructure to maintain.
Thank you, Mr. Edlund. A question from Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question about this chart and the next one. There's been a lot of discussion recently with regard to the park board and them going out for a referendum for additional levy capacity. Is this the place we would see under the funding sources for 5-year capital where they would be looking to increase the levy? So they get 2% of the city's levy now. Would their proposal would be an excess levy, or it would be to increase their portion of this levy?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Goodman, if I could just wait a little bit, when I get into the bond redemption levy picture, I can kind of bring in their requests. So if I could just wait a little bit, I'll bring in where that levy will.
Can you just skip ahead?
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm also interested in slide number 37, which is the slide of the breakdown in 1 year and a 1-year snapshot. And I'm just wondering why the idea of working with them to increase their portion of our CLIC process in return for not having a special referendum. I'm not volunteering to lead this effort. I'm just simply saying it seems silly that we would be talking about having a school board levy, then a park board levy, and now potentially some sort of street levy, which we should really be using property taxes for in the first place. All these excess levies just mean even higher taxes outside the process, and I'm concerned about that. And when I look at what the percentages that they get for maintaining neighborhood parks, I mean, it probably seems right to me, but maybe there is a compromise to be made where they would double the amount that they had within the existing levy and not do a referendum. And I'm wondering if that has been discussed or brought up, if anyone has discussed this. Anyone in the mayor's office discussed this with the park board? Because I'm concerned that we're going to have an out of control referendum situation on the ballot.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Goodman, I don't have all the details on the park board's request, but the volume of dollars that are being talked about obviously are fairly significant. And so adding some incremental dollars to what is now the net debt bond levy probably would not make the kinds of improvements and the kind of progress they're trying to achieve on their backlog of work. So I don't have specifics for you, but I just know that, doubling what they've got here would be a small step in that direction. So, Sandy, do you have any more detail on?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Abelin, my concern is that having a special referendum to get 9 million would have a dramatic impact. So perhaps there's a way to mitigate the overall impact to taxpayers by agreeing to put more into our net debt bond capacity, because it would be easier to get it from the city in cooperation, because people care about neighborhood parks, than it would be to do an entire campaign, raise money, and then be out there with the school board doing their thing, and then potentially this new kooky idea that we're going to have a levy for streets.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Goodman, you're absolutely correct. There are different ways that we could achieve getting enough resources to do the things that, our hired public employees are saying are necessary to keep up our infrastructure. One of them could certainly be to increase the net debt bond levy fairly significantly to provide extra dollars for parks and for streets. These other ideas are at this point ideas that are being surfaced that are based on things that have happened in other cities. I know the street resurfacing levy idea has some origination from Seattle and things they've done in Seattle. And the park board is just looking at ways to generate more dollars. But there are certainly ways this could be handled through the net debt bond program.
Could do both. Councilmember or Council President Johnson, then Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think it is important that we have a discussion with the Park Board about this issue quickly. Public dollars are getting spent for campaigning at this point for at least a feasibility study has been done, which was brought to our group through the committee of the whole. But I mean, Councilmember Goodman is right. If we have our levy goes up, then we have a referendum that is a park referendum, then we have another referendum that's a school board referendum, and then we have another referendum that's a referendum for our streets, for our basic city services, which I think is a terrible idea. But anyway, it all comes on that property tax bill. And if we're talking the park board, I mean, I wonder sometimes if we would double the amount that, we allocate through the net debt bond program, we're talking about doubling the number of projects. Do they even have the capacity to handle the doubling of projects? Or is that going to, make their operations dollars go up? Then they'll need that too. So we really need to have a fulsome discussion about the overall burden to taxpayers in Minneapolis. And I think we better do it pretty quick.
Thank you. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know TPW Chair Reich is not here, but maybe Councilmember Palmisano knows. My understanding is that we will have a presentation about our declining pavement quality here at the next TPW meeting. And I know, from my previous professional experience, and we do have a pretty serious situation with our road quality because of deferred maintenance for several decades of not maintaining our roads, which we now need to find a way to pay for. And I don't have an opinion at this point about the political strategy there, but I do know that, as somebody who's thinking forward to the coming decades, if we continue to defer that maintenance, we are going to be left with an even larger bill, which is full reconstruction projects instead of maintenance projects, which are significantly more expensive. And then we'll be left to find a way to pay for that. So I'm really looking forward to that TPW presentation. I know a lot of us new council members in particular probably haven't ever had that level of detail about our deferred and road maintenance problems.
Good. Councilmember Palmisano, you have a response for Councilmember Bender?
Sure. Just that I know that that's coming. I'm not sure it's in the very next TPW meeting. But I do know that Public Works is preparing that conversation.
And to continue the conversation, I want to check. Is it Council President?
Councilmember Goodman.
Goodman, thank you.
I have had the opportunity to deal with the pavement issue when we sadly took every penny of the Hilton Fund and put it into a 5-year repaving program and spent $25 million on it, which I voted for and supported. So I understand that issue. And I have streets in my ward that have pavement condition indexes in the 30s. So I understand that. The issue is that, in my opinion, I think that's what your property taxes are for. And this is like a set aside. Let's have a levy on the Office of Equity then. Let's have a levy on the Civil Rights Department's office. Let's have a levy on all of the other things everyone thinks are important. I just think that strategy is wrong. This is our pavement condition index, our infrastructure is a huge issue. I have supported it in the past, but we can't just carve that out and say, we're not going to cover it in our budget because we have all these other things we want to do, but let's call that out. And that's why I don't like it with the park system either. I think we're better off having some sort of trusting global solution to acknowledge that neighborhood parks play a really big role in property values and why people live here, and they are as important as streets and sewers and all of those other things, and try to work out some sort of compromise on behalf of the taxpayers, because that's what we were elected to do. And so, I mean, I don't have any leadership role in any of this. I don't chair Ways and Means. I'm not the council president. I'm not the mayor. I'm just representing my constituents who I think would support an increase in neighborhood parks, and they would probably support an increase in roads too, but they don't want to be nickeled and dimed on a levy here and a levy there, and that's my concern.
Council Vice President, you're up first.
Well, I guess what I would suggest is I do agree that there needs to be kind of a stronger strategy developed with some of these other entities. I actually think about it a little bit differently. I think there is a strategy where there's going to be some winners and some losers. And I have been to some of these meetings where some of these different elements are being discussed. And I can tell you, and you can have your own opinions from your own neighborhood meetings, what is coming out is very popular. And that's what it's going to be, kind of a who gets first in line in a popularity contest instead of an overarching look at kind of what are the global needs that support all these different things. And so at the end of the day, I don't know that I feel as strongly as Councilmember Goodman that it has to be property taxes solely, but I have been a fan of that in the past just for the transparency of seeing what's the total amount that you're paying, sort of that philosophy to it. But it kind of doesn't matter if one entity decides to kind of move forward because we haven't at least tried to have the conversation with them. So good conversation, and I am hopeful that our partners, not just at the park board, but also our friends who are working on housing, who have also talked about this, are willing to be part of a bigger strategic conversation. At the end of the day, it's about how much money can we really put out there to support these needs into the future. And it's not just our infrastructure, it's also our dollars that are going into housing and other really, really big picture things that we're going to have to balance. So thank you.
Indeed. Thanks. Councilmember Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to be more clear, I think we're facing a situation of deferred maintenance that's piled up over the years because of a lack of willingness to invest in our streets. And there may have been debates about that in the past, but I just want to acknowledge that maybe this, to the point that Council Vice President was making, that maybe streets aren't the most exciting and dazzling thing, but as we let them crumble, the costs of repairing them astronomically increase. And so it's just one of these really important issues that, again, I'm not sure what the solution is politically. I don't know that we can solve it this year or next year, but over time, it's something that I feel pretty strongly that we have to take on head on, whether it's making tougher decisions about how we're balancing our existing property taxes or increasing the property taxes. But the purpose of a levy is to let people vote on it because ostensibly the council wouldn't support it. So just to put that out there, that I just highlight that, our street infrastructure is kind of one of the basic things that city government provides. And for many decades, it has been left to not have the level of investment that probably should have.
Mr. Chair, taking into account everything everybody's said here, we do have some good things to, work from. We came out of a great recession in much stronger shape than many cities. And during that time, we paid down our debts here at the city of Minneapolis through difficult decisions. And now we're seeing, a spurt in economic activity. We've got growth occurring in property values and everything. And so the good news is I think we're going to have the financial wherewithal to be able to make some improvements on that deferred maintenance now. And so the good news is we have serious growth going on, and we have potential to take care of a lot of these needs that have, in fact, built up over time. So if there's a conclusion to all of this, the good news is there is good news. So I hope that's comforting, and it is about tax burden, but we do have a lot of good things happening job-wise, values-wise. So we should be able to make progress. Okay, so this is the 5-year plan we talked about, the funding sources. A couple of the other big sources here are assessments and municipal state aid. Municipal state aid comes from gas taxes. They fund a lot of improvements to roads and bridges. Assessments do come from improved properties. That's about all I need to say about that. This is the slide Sandy had in her presentation, just showing for 2016 where are the dollars being invested. Again, Public Works is about 80%. We have some big building projects in the plan. For 16, there's fire station related activity and stuff. And the other thing I was going to say is if you look at page G 18 through 20 in the mayor's recommended capital section, you will see details of individual projects that make this up. I don't try to highlight every single project that's in here, but we will get to some of them a little bit further along. And here's the funding sources for the 2016 program. Again, a lot of the same sort of big amounts for net debt bonds and enterprise revenues, et cetera. Okay, at this point, I'd like to talk about just a few of the changes that are net debt bond related that occurred between what was recommended by the CLIC committee for 2016 versus what is now in there with the mayor's budget. So a couple of these changes are the mayor did move $605,000 of the elevator money that CLIC had moved into 17. She moved it back to 16. So there's no net change there, just a timing issue. She also restored $200,000 for the alley renovation program and $150,000 for the unpaved alley program. So when CLIC was making their decisions, there's always more requested than there is funds to do things, and so it's a prioritization. And in the totality of CLIC's work, they had made some cuts that the mayor wanted to see restored. So that's those alley programs. The other thing she added was a new project, PV 128. This is a project for a redesign of 3rd Avenue out here. For $3 million. The big part of that is a protected bike lane as part of that redesign. And then also you'll see down PV 129 is another project that the mayor has added for $400,000, and that is to make some safety improvements for pedestrians on Vineland Place around the Walker Arts Center and the Park Board property down there. The other thing is a $250,000 reduction in IT enterprise infrastructure. Again, this is one of those areas that we're going to be scaling down from capital and moving into operating.
Excuse me, Mr. Ablin. Councilmember Fry, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do. It's a question, and this is not a rhetorical question. I'm being serious. The Vineland Place, is that over by the Walker?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Fry, yeah, it's the roadway that passes on the way to Parade Stadium.
And what's the pavement index of that road?
I'm not exactly sure.
I honestly don't remember it being that bad, and I know that there are several other roads in my ward, and I'm sure many others that have got just.
This was presented as part of the CLIC process, is that correct?
No, this one was added after the CLIC process.
Okay.
And I believe the issue is more about pedestrian safety than it is necessarily poor road condition, as I understood it.
Well, I'm seeing changes from the CLIC. So this wasn't presented by staff?
Correct.
As a request, this is something that was added to it?
Right.
Okay.
And would the reason for the addition be included within the budget books? Whether it was pavement or potholes or pedestrian improvements?
Will it be, I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Where can I find the reasoning, the explanation?
Councilmember Quincy, Councilmember Fry, the development of these projects for Vineland and also 3rd Avenue will need to be defined by Public Works, and they will be needing to put together a proposal that documents what would be done. That's not quite done yet, so I don't have that for you.
For the 3rd Avenue one, I'm pretty well aware of the purpose, and it's self-explanatory right here on the screen, but the Vineland one, I don't know.
I will I will try and get that information and send an email out to everybody with those
Thank
two
you.
projects. Okay. Finally, the only other thing I wanted to highlight is that in total, the mayor made some changes to 2016, significantly less changes to the out years. And in total, the net debt bond plan is still at 155 million. So there has not been an expansion of the amount of dollars for net debt. It's more of a timing thing, in addition to adding a couple priorities that she wanted to see done. So no increases per se in the budget. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. This picture here is the bond redemption levy. Again, this is a tax levy that is specific to paying these net debt bonds. The net debt bonds help us to do capital work. And if you look at the early years there from 2001 through 2005, that's how you would normally expect to see, a correlation between how much money you spend on capital and how much levy you need to garner to pay that capital off with interest. So that's sort of the typical flow of levy versus spending. Due to obvious problems with the economy in 2003 with LGA reductions, and then again when we get to the years after 2008, different decisions had to be made about timing of when do you levy for things and when do you expand the budget to do things. And so you see some peaks and valleys there, and most notably are these peaks here where the spending is significantly higher, and then here again where it's higher. And so during those time frames, the levies were not raised as quickly. So if you didn't raise them at some point, you would start to fall behind in your ability to pay off that debt. So what we're seeing here is strictly what's being authorized to spend and what are the levy dollars to pay for that spending. What you're not seeing here is how much debt is currently on the books of this variety that needs to be paid by these levies. And you're also not seeing the authorizations to issue debt where we just haven't sold the bonds yet. And so there's a couple other demands that are generating the need for the levy now to be a little bit higher than what we're authorizing for spending. And so we're doing a little catch up, but we're also growing the amount that we're going to be able to authorize for spending in the future. So we're trying to build a higher base of bond redemption levy so that in the future we'll be able to do more capital improvements.
Council
And
President.
so,
Mr. Abelin, what in this chart would tell you the effect of interest rates? I mean, the interest rates in 2006, 2007 and today are half of what?
Mr. Chair, Council Member Johnson, there's nothing in this chart that specifically would pick up on that and be able to display
Okay,
what that.
then what has been the effect of lower interest rates for us in our bonding program?
The effect is essentially that we can authorize closer to the amount that we're levying for new spending because we don't need as much money for interest. So the shorter that we keep the debt and the lower the interest rates are, the closer those two lines here can converge and be, the levy just slightly above what we're authorizing for spending. Now, if interest rates go up significantly, then we will need to have a bigger gap between what we can spend and what we would have to levy to pay for it. And also if we changed our philosophy on how we are going to structure the debt. If we want to go longer with our debt, that tends to be into the higher interest rates, and so therefore you would need more levy to pay for each dollar of capital invested.
Having said that, though, what's our typical timeline right now? I mean, on our bonds.
Councilmember Quincy, Councilmember Johnson, our timeline varies with each series of bonds we issue, but on average we try and keep this kind of debt to something 5 years, around 5 years, Sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 6, but on average, in that 5-year range. Kind of in conjunction with the 5-year plan, so it just kind of is flowing.
At times in the past, we've been out much farther than that. Is that correct?
Yes, we have been out farther. In certain types of infrastructure, we will go longer, like water improvements,
Sure.
where we're paying for a new water plant or something. But this debt, if we can keep it shorter, the interest rates in the shorter years are always lower than they are as you go out on the interest rate curve.
But if we went longer, we might have more capacity.
If we do what?
If we went longer, we
If we
might have more capacity.
No, if we go longer, we end up having less capacity. And that's kind of the fallacy, because what happens is the higher amount of interest that you have to pay cuts into what you can do in the future, because it starts to be a bigger proportion of your expense becomes interest instead of just paying off that principal and reducing your interest expense. So if we could be in an ideal situation, might be pay as you go entirely, because then every
it's just
dollar
part
you
of the levy
levied
then.
would be going towards capital. But there's trade-offs with operations and what you can do.
Be nice to do all cash, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you're paying for a long-term asset, and so it makes some sense too. But I'm just curious with the phenomenally low interest rates that we've had, and I know that can change when the Fed meets or whatever. But I mean, what adjustments have we made during this time of very low interest rates to take advantage of that?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, I would say that we've been able to program a higher proportion of our net debt bonds to be spent for capital improvements and less for interest on those bonds. So we're sort of maximizing the bang for the buck we get from our bond redemption levy because of the low rates. It's helping us do as much
Let's
as
do
we
more
possibly
projects.
can from an infrastructure perspective.
Okay, thanks.
Okay?
Are we able to take advantage of any refinancing opportunities through these bonds?
Yeah, I do have an example of that coming up here. So I'll move on from the levy. So here is some additional details on what's in the 5-year plan. So the rest of this presentation will be about what's in 2016 only. So this is the 2016 net debt bond program. So this shows where 32.8 million is going to be spent for 2016. And if you look on your pages G17 in the budget book, you can see a bigger picture of all 5 years that sort of is by major subject, so you can see how much is being spent on street paving versus bridges versus public buildings, et cetera. I can't cover that all in the slides here, but if you looked at that, you would see that about a third, not quite a third of our net debt bonds are going for paving improvements, as an example. And if you throw in bridges, which are also an expensive type of infrastructure, close to half of our net debt bonds in the next 5 years are going for streets and bridges. So they are obviously needing improvements, and we're trying to make some of those gains in the backlog, if you will. All right, the non-tax supported sources. This just shows what's in the 2016 program. So 91.6 million is coming from municipal state aid, assessments, the utility funds, and other, which includes grants and other sources for the capital program. In terms of individual areas of the budget, Municipal Building Commission has a little bit under $3 million for projects in 2016. Again, elevators is a chunk of that, as well as exterior improvements. And it should be noted that these totals reflect both the Hennepin County funding that comes to make improvements in this building, as well as the city's net debt bond contribution. So they share capital 50-50. So a total of about 12 million in the 5-year plan. Okay. In terms of the park board, They've got $4.9 million in what I would call sort of neighborhood park improvement programs. This does not represent the total capital program of the park board. They have regional funds and other sources in their capital program that do not come through the city's processes. This is more related to the net debt bond program, as well as showing some of their park capital levy that's in the program for neighborhood parks. So 4.9 million in 2016 and about a little under 24 million in the 5-year plan. Okay.
Council President, did you have another
Oh,
item?
sorry.
Oh, that's fine. I was just checking.
Okay. Moving on, the Public Works Department. Obviously, they have a large number of individual projects. So how I try to cover them each year is show of their 10 largest projects, what percent of their budget is that. So their 2016 budget is 39.3 million of our 124. And for the 5-year plan, they have 259 million of the 660 million, or about 46% of the 5-year plan, just in these top 10 programs. And these are a lot of times recurring things like the storm drain and tunnel program and large improvements to the water distribution facility and sanitary tunnel rehab. So these are recurring things that take, a good sized portion of the capital budget. Information technology, the big thing that's in there is the police management system. They're upgrading what used to be, I'm losing the name. Oh, they have their own capers, yeah. So this is the replacement program for that. Public grounds and facilities. So in 2016 is a pretty good investment, 12.9 million. We've got a couple fire station projects in there, Hamilton school improvements, and then we are in the process, Public Works is in the process of considering a new solid waste facility. So this is another year of funding on that. There was some funding set aside last year, and there'll be more. A total of, well, you see the 22 million in the 5-year plan. They had 3 million from last year as well, so a total of 25 for that particular project. Okay. Miscellaneous projects, Art in Public Places has 580,000 for 2016 and a little over 3 million in the 5-year plan. And then we have the public systems, public safety radio system replacement, which is the 800 megawatts receivers that the police and fire use, as well as Public Works. So we're in the process of a major replacement of those handheld units and base stations. All right, the last thing I want to say about the capital projects themselves is that the operating costs that are incurred to maintain these are in the operating budgets, and we don't automatically put dollars in when a capital improvement is going to require additional dollars, and we don't take dollars out if it's going to save money. So they have to manage that within their operating budget requests each year. From a ratings perspective, CLIC gives like extra credit for projects that save money on operating costs after the project's completed. And they can punish a project or take away points if there is going to be new projects that take up dollars that weren't being spent before. So new infrastructure, if they don't have a good way to pay for those operating costs, specified in their capital proposal, it can actually cost them points on their ratings. So, and finally, they're very challenging to estimate operating cost implications on projects. You could think of roadways, a certain length of roadway. How do you determine what it's going to cost to maintain that? So they use averages, and it's difficult to be real accurate with them. Okay, any questions about the capital program? Otherwise, I'll go on the debt. All right. A lot of times we talk about debt capacity, and when we talk about debt capacity, it's really about, legally what are we allowed to issue as debt, and That's governed by state statute, and it's 3 1/3% of our assessed market value. Currently, as of last year, that would have allowed us to issue $1.12 billion worth of debt, but we are only using a portion of that, so we have up to $970 million of debt that we could issue before we would be in violation of the state statute on debt. Now, that all sounds good, but it really isn't as much about capacity to issue as it is capacity to pay. So when we get to, the talking about the various levies that we talked about earlier, and, an infrastructure levy and a park board capital levy and all these things, we could issue debt for those things, but then we have to pay for it. So the capacity to pay and the willingness of the taxpayers to be able to make those investments and pay for them over time is really the most important thing in maintaining infrastructure and having a balance between the cost to live here and the cost for levies versus how much and how quickly you want to get your infrastructure up to a certain standard. So we're making progress on it all, and I foresee that happening, perhaps at an increasing rate in the future because we've come out of the Great Recession and we're doing well. But there is the capacity to pay issue that we always have to face. Okay. This is a picture of our outstanding debt, and it's a good picture in the sense that from 2006 through 15, you can see the city's total debt going down. At the peak out in 2004, we were actually at about 1.3 billion. By 06, that was 1.2 billion. It's been dropping, and this is our general obligation debt. So estimating at the end of 2015, we'll be at around 690 million. So about half of what we were back in 04, which is giving me my enthusiasm about the ability to do some additional capital improvements because we have a lot of that expense off the books now. So adding some new dollars in, we are at a much lower level of debt than we used to be. So, I think with improving values and improving economics, it's okay to do some additional work now. Okay. And the other debt up here is non-general obligation debt. This is stuff that has to do with economic development projects where businesses are given incentives with job creation, et cetera, to do certain things that the city would issue debt for. They pay that debt. There's no obligation by our taxpayers to pay that debt. The businesses pay that debt back. So that debt has been fairly stable over the years, if not slightly dropping. But it could go up again if we have more development. In terms of where is our general obligation debt at the end of 2015, our largest balances are in the enterprise funds. So this one here is a combination of parking debt on ramps as well as water fund. We have a small amount of debt outstanding on the sanitary and storm funds, but the biggest parts of this is water and parking. And then we have the convention center, and this column of numbers here shows where the high point was in 2004. You can see that the convention center has been more than cut in half. That debt is currently scheduled to be paid off in full by 2020. So we have not been issuing new debt for the convention center. That debt is in fact being paid off fairly rapidly between now and the end of 2020. Tax increment debt also has been on the pay down mode. We haven't been doing a lot of new tax increment projects where we have a general obligation tax pledge. We have policies in place as to when that debt can be used, and we could still do that when responsible projects come up, but we haven't done very many of those in several years. It's probably 2005 or 6 was some of the last projects that we actually did where we issued general obligation tax increment debt. Special assessments rise and fall with, the level of capital work. Other self-supporting has some park board related work in there. And I think, I'm not sure what else is all in there. Net debt bonds is fairly stable. This is the debt that we're constantly issuing and we're constantly paying off. So back in 2004, we were at 56.8 million. That debt had gotten as high as 91 million or so, and now it's back down to 57. And I should say that the 57 million here includes an estimated issuance of about $40 million in 2015. So if we don't end up issuing all of that, that number could end up being lower. So that'll depend on how much progress departments are making in 2015 and how much debt we'll have to issue to reimburse those capital expenditures. And the library referendum debt, that was a $140 million referendum. We issued all of that debt, so that debt is now at 73.75 million, and that's obviously in payoff mode. We are going to start to get some assistance from the state starting in 2017, so that debt will start to be paid off a little bit more rapidly when we start receiving their anticipated funding. So that debt is going down. So we can see that we've made a lot of progress. So that's when I said, we have some capacity for future improvements. It's due to having our debt under better control and being able to, pay off bonds. Here's a graphic picture of the various purposes of our bonds and where the big pieces are. You can see enterprise funds is 27%. Convention Center 17, and so Convention Center and tax increment will continue to go down. Net debt, if we improve more, that debt could actually go up, and that would be okay as long as we have the levy support to be able to pay for it. Library referendum should continue to go down. And enterprise funds, the parking fund is currently dropping nicely each year. We haven't been issuing a lot of new parking debt. And the water fund is staying high because we continue to make a lot of improvements in the water system. So that debt will probably stay at a fairly robust level for a while. And then we have some certain sewer projects that could cause some increases in some sewer debt, although we're trying to do more pay-as-you-go on a lot of our enterprise infrastructure as well. In terms of 2016's debt service budget, we have a 124.11 million total estimated for 2015, or I mean for 2016. And you can see that 103 million of that is for principal. Oops, I'm sorry. And oops, what did I do? 21 million is for interest. So about 83% principal and 17% interest. And so, Barb, you had talked earlier about interest rates. Well, if interest rates had been higher from, let's say, 2005 or 7 till now, what we would likely be seeing here is a disproportionately higher amount of interest versus principal because, we would still have roughly the same amount of dollars available to pay things, but we would have had to been paying more interest and less principal. So this is a good picture of trying to be rapid with our drawdown of principal and therefore leveraging as many dollars of that levy for capital improvements as we can. So hopefully if interest rates stay low, we can still be fairly aggressive and get a lot of work done for the bonds that we do issue. Okay. Again, here's where that debt is being paid from. So net debt bonds, while it's, I'm going to go back and show this. So net debt bonds here is $57.9 million of the total debt, which if you looked at the total, you could see that that's less than 10% of the outstanding bonds, right? But if we look at how it's being paid off, oops, went too far again. It's 28% of the debt service. So that's another indication of where, we try to be aggressive in paying that debt off so that we can, make as many improvements as we can. Okay. Here is the interest expense for the last 4 years, from 13 through what it's going to be in 16. And so you can see here, here's kind of your interest rates going down over time. What's happening is we're having a lower average interest rate on our outstanding debt. And our actual interest is even less than this because this is budgeted interest. And we have some variable rate debt. On the next slide, I'm going to talk about variable rate debt. We budget that at 5%, but lately I've been paying about 0.58%. So less than, much less than 1%. So our actual performance is better than these budgeted numbers even. Some of the reasons for this reduction in interest expense has to do with, pension bonds that were paid off in 2012. The last of those were paid off in 2012, so that's having a beneficial effect on how much interest we're paying in the future. And then just paying down library referendum debt, paying down convention center debt, that's leading to lower overall interest expense. Okay. Here's a picture of our property tax debt. This is the net debt bonds per person in the city of Minneapolis. So you can see back in 2006, we had over $600 per person of property tax supported debt. As we approach the end of 15, we're something less than 300. So again, sort of that reduction in debt, again, gives credence to the ability to perhaps issue some additional debt for much needed capital. Okay. Here's some current refunding transactions that we have completed so far this year. These particular ones are in that non-general obligation bond debt category. These bonds are paid for with TIF revenues. They were on some housing projects back in the mid-2000s. We had done several projects where we were participating with developers and cleaning up land and doing things so that they could build private for sale housing and condos and things like that. So these bonds have been recently refunded. The first two issues were done in March of this year, and we just finished the Ivy Tower one. So that's generated gross interest savings of $4.3 million over time. So a nice amount. And what that's going to do for us, even though our taxpayers aren't paying it out of our property taxes, it's going to allow us to decertify those districts a little bit sooner, and therefore those tax dollars will come back on the tax rolls sooner as a result of this interest savings.
Councilmember Goodman, I knew you wanted to talk about that. I think you should highlight it and say it again.
It's not just about the savings from refunding. It's that those properties go back onto the tax
Right.
rolls, and that Grant Park property is worth like $200 million more. I mean, it's huge. And same with the Ivy Tower. So although the Ivy Tower is like a whole nother story with the foreclosure and all those issues, but the Grant Park thing's been a huge success. And anything we can put back on the tax rolls is better.
And we're in the process, on Thursday of this week, we're going to be taking bids, excuse me, on the Unical, East River Unical project. So that'll be a smaller project, but it'll generate some additional interest savings. And then finally, on the bottom of this, we have the potential by the end of this year, as I look at cash positions and stuff, we may be able to actually prepay some debt with cash resources on hand. So if we do that, that's better than a current refunding because we don't even have any debt left after I pay it off. So those are some opportunities that are still coming before the end of the year. Okay. Variable rate debt, we talked a little bit about it. Of that $690 million, approximately about $42 million or 6% of that is in variable rate mode. It has primarily to do with parking ramps in the city. And because that rate has been so low with these low interest rates, it has allowed us to prepay certain parking fund debt early instead of doing the refunding. we're actually able to save money on interest here and prepay bonds when they come due, which is very beneficial. And for a while there, we had, some tough sledding during the recession with parking operations and less business activity. So having these bonds in variable rate mode during those years really helped the financial performance of the parking fund. And it continues to do that today as it's below 0.6%. So we're in the process now of doing a potential transaction for Nicollet Mall that would be in variable rate mode to try and help on an interim basis finance the improvements to Nicollet Mall for the assessed portion. And we may use something like that again for the Target Center and even for the capital program if it seems like the right thing to do. Right now, with talk of rates going up, we'll have to see if we want to end up doing that or not. But it's been very beneficial because it's way less than fixed rates have been for the last decade, you might as well say. Okay. These are just the dates that Sandy had mentioned earlier. November 18th is the public comment on the levy and the budget, and the December 9th public hearing on the budget and budget adoption. And that's really all I have for you, unless there's questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Apel. I'm not seeing any questions. I would like to just add my comment. Thanks for helping us manage our money. As we pay down debt, it certainly provides more opportunity to use that cash for other things, which is important. And I think it really reflects the whole right-sizing concept of this budget and to a degree last year's budget that we all wrestled with. Instead of taxing people for debt, we're actually able to identify how much we'll be able to need. And when we're receiving more than we're budgeting for, or we're receiving less than we're budgeting for, those are much better to manage and use those resources as wisely. Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to thank Sandy Christensen and Mike. This was a very good, well-spent 2 hours. I thought the presentation was extremely well done, and it was really well done for people of kind of all levels of knowledge of the process. I debated whether or not I wanted to be here after going through this for a long period of time, and I just thought it was a very, very good use of time, and I wanted to thank you for the presentation, and I know what kind of work went into putting all these slides together, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Ms. Christensen, any final comments?
Chair Quincy and members of the committee, I realize I was remiss in introducing some very integral members of our budget team. I sometimes forget about them because they just go at it and get it done, and I never hear a peep out of them, and bam, there's a budget book distributed last week. So these folks actually work for Latonia, but I want to introduce Brad Honnell, Chris Sargent, Jeff Muriguri, and Gina Maharjan. Some new faces this year. Gina and Chris just joined us, and I think this is second time through for Jeff and Brad, or is this your first time through?
This will be my second.
Second time. Okay, so we're still getting them integrated in the program, and they hit the ground running.
Well, thanks very much, everyone, for all of the effort to put this together and for all of your availability for the questions that are about to come in the next month and a half. We're going to be at your door. So thank you very much for everybody. I think we can adjourn today's session and look forward to the next budget presentation series, which I think is on the 18th. So thank you all.